Hi, I'm Emily Johnson, certified financial planner and founder of Polaris Capital Advisors, and this is Money Matters, the show where we aim to inspire your financial confidence. This week, we're going to be looking at how the stars manage their money. And in looking at some of those factors, it's been really interesting to see. Some of their ideas are way out here, and some of them are very mainstream, and we're going to bring a few of those to you so that you can implement those in your financial life. So please stick with us. We'll be right back with more Money Matters. Welcome back to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, and as I mentioned in the opening, today we're going to be discussing how the stars manage their money. And in doing some research on this segment, I basically Googled wealth advice from the rich and famous, wealth advice from celebrities, and you would be amazed at the massive amount of very interesting advice that our celebrities, whether they be athletic celebrities, musical celebrities, everyone from Lady Gaga to Bill Belichick has financial advice when asked what their greatest financial tip is. So I decided to focus on two of the main themes, actually three, I guess, of the main themes that I saw over and over again, and just focus on two specific individuals. But as I said, these themes came up over and over again as I was looking for inspiration on how the rich and famous manage their money and what some of their key tips are. So to get started, here's somebody that everybody knows and loves, or hopefully loves. I don't know if you will all love LeBron James, but I love LeBron James. And he, of course, is well known when it comes to discussing his finances and a lot of the financial decisions that he makes. But what is also interesting are some of the smaller facts that he doesn't necessarily talk about as much. So one of the most interesting quotes that I heard him say was, I don't like to take advice because experience is the best teacher. And I think that we can all relate to that in one way or another, whether it be from a financial advice perspective or not. And he certainly has made the best of that experience. And he says that he is the self-proclaimed cheapest player in basketball. So his number one theme is basically being a frugal money vigilante. Some examples of that are that despite his massive fortune, I think he made about $86 million in 2017, he refuses to pay for mobile apps. He uses the free Pandora app, and he also takes the roaming off of his cell phone so that he doesn't have to pay extra data charges. Now, I'm thinking that he can certainly afford to pay for these things, but he is the definition of what we call a money vigilante, and that's just basically a personality type that focuses on down to the core of taking care of his money and really valuing the dollar. And how did he get that way? Well, as he says, as a young boy, his uncles taught him to save a portion of every single dollar that they gave him. So he started doing that, whether it was in, under his bed or in a bank account. He started doing that at a very, very early age, and that's a value that he has now taken with him with all of his massive success that he has. So I think the biggest takeaway is not just that he's a money vigilante, but what that means is that you have a real value-based view of money. He definitely has a strong value-based view of his money. And we've talked about this before when it comes to putting together a financial plan. One of the core aspects of a financial plan is understanding what you value when it comes to your money. Is it long-term peace of mind? Is it investing in education? What is it that you value, and how can you use your money towards supporting that value? And he definitely epitomizes that value-oriented aspect of his money. So what can we take away from this? Well, number one is we can talk to our kids about money values, not just about money and how much they spend and how much is coming out of our pocket and what happened to that last 20 that was in my wallet, but really talk to them about money values in a non-threatening, open, evolving values type way, because obviously small kids are not going to understand as much as older kids are. So starting really slow and answering age-appropriate questions is really key, but doing it in a value-oriented way, perhaps an either-or. Does the child want X, or would he rather wait and save for Y? And how is that decision made? Be honest with the children, talk about their values, not figures, and set perhaps relatable goals as they get older. These are just some of the basic aspects of teaching kids about money in a value-oriented way, just as LeBron learned. And so interesting that 69% of parents actually say that they don't talk to their kids about money. So not only are we not teaching our kids about money in school and personal finance and the basics of personal finance, we're not talking about it at home either. So it's not a surprise that we as a nation have so many financial woes at a grassroots level. So one takeaway from the LeBron James money management tip is talk to your kids about money values. Start there, and hopefully they can take that with them for the rest of their life. The next takeaway from LeBron James, this was pretty interesting, and it's not overly surprising, I'm sure, for most of you, is that he has multiple income streams. So of course you're saying, well, yes, he makes $86 million a year playing basketball, and then he also has endorsement money coming in. All very true, and I realize that that is not necessarily an option for all of us out there. However, he also, in addition to that, is just an entrepreneur. As a young kid, there are great stories about him, of course, starting up the Standard lemonade stands and that type of thing. But he also started a marketing and a sports representation agency when he was just a kid with his neighborhood buddies. That probably ended up working out pretty well for some of them. So he was entrepreneurial, and he was looking for different ways to earn money and he still is doing that even with his salary coming in. So what is the purpose of doing that, and why is that something that we should also consider? Well, obviously, we never know what's going to come next, right? And you hear this from players in the NFL, you hear it from pretty much anybody, but especially athletes at this high level. They don't know when they're going to be injured. They don't know when that contract is going to stop. So they have to make the most of those funds that they're earning when they're earning them, and then hopefully have other income streams to supplement that so that if one gets shut down, they're able to keep going. And that's the same is true for us. So even if we have a W-2 income, if we're working part-time, those types of jobs can go away in a flash, whether it be because of a bad economy or because of a car wreck. I mean, life happens. So being prepared for life's inevitable ups and downs is something that we have to do. And one way to do it is by having multiple income streams. If you want to be self-reliant, I mean, obviously if you have multiple income households, etc., this changes up a little bit, but having multiple income streams is imperative. So how can you do that? Let's see if I've got it here. Yes, here we go. So the way to do that is to think about your income as a portfolio. So you're all used to looking, I'm sure we've looked at this before. If this is your first time looking at the show, this is a pie chart of an asset allocation. So we're going to look at it a little bit differently this time. And when we're talking about multiple income streams, we want to diversify our income streams the exact same way we want to diversify our investments. And the reason is because greater diversification allows for risk reduction. It allows for changes to different asset classes as the economy might ebb and flow. So let's say, for example, you have a full-time job working in food and beverage industry, and we have a downturn in the economy. This is not a big surprise. But you also have a second job that you're working online doing graphic arts that may or may not be impacted the same way. So each of these pieces of your income portfolio, of your income pie, are going to be impacted differently. And one can step up, just like what happens when you have investments. One can step up should the other one start to fall down. So a couple of examples. If you have a full-time job, get a side hustle, something that you can do at night, something that you can do in your pajamas, so that you have a little bit of extra income coming in, and see if it's possible to pocket that extra income so that it's there as a cushion should something actually happen to your W-2 job. Another, income-producing investments, real estate investments. I'm sure you hear about a lot of that on WHHI. Passive income strategies. One of LeBron's most famous ones is Beats. He was one of the earliest investors in Beats, and he ended up taking away from that investment about $30 million, I believe. I think it was the highest equity investment, highest equity return investment for an athlete thus far in history. So that was a pretty darn good investment. Whether we have access to something like Beats at an early level or something else, that type of investment, that sort of long-term investment, is another form of an investment like a portfolio. So looking at your income as a portfolio, the more the more income streams you have, the less risk that you're going to be taking on, the less stress that you're going to have, the less stress for your family, and always that's a greater opportunity to put more of that money away. So here's a few of our examples. There's lots and lots of resources out there for you. If you have any questions about that, give me a call. We certainly have plenty that we can send out to you. So stick with us. We'll be right back with one more star-studded example of money management tips. We'll be right back with more Money Matters. Welcome back to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, and we have been discussing star-studded tips on money management. We just finished discussing LeBron James. His suggestions have been over-the-top successful, so I think we can use those as an example to follow. If you Google money management when it comes to celebrities, you might also see several examples of things that you might not want to follow. So here is one example of that, and this is, I seriously was looking in some way to pay homage to Burt Reynolds, the now late great Burt Reynolds, in doing this, and as I looked more into his financial past, I realized that there's not a whole lot to bring out of this other than some fantastic pictures and a really, really great teaching case, because there is no such thing as a non-teaching case. You can always use it as a bad example. And so as much as Burt Reynolds is dear to our heart, I think that when we look at his financial tips and his financial past, we can see a lot of advice on perhaps things to avoid, and we're going to look at a couple of those, but we're going to look at them in the same light that we were looking at the positive tips and or traits that LeBron James had. So starting out, Burt Reynolds, so he had lots and lots of headaches, and let me count the ways. So we had bad investments, bad advice, didn't read the small print over and over again. If you read several of the articles with his quotes, you'll see he said over and over again, I didn't read the small print. Of course, a lot of it was blaming other people too, but it was also, I didn't read this, I didn't read that. I had no idea that that was in there. So things just sort of kept popping up. He also believed that his income would never stop. And like everybody else, there was a point where it started to dry up. And of course, that happens at just the wrong time. That's the way Murphy's Law works for everybody. He also made a lot of emotional decisions, had a couple of bad marriages, and was definitely into some overindulgence in a lot of ways that caused to a lot of overspending. So I look at this in the same way that we were just looking at the other portfolios or the other pies in the multiple income streams. This is an example of a completely screwball portfolio, which basically involves no oversight. So this is my visual example of what a bad asset allocation would look like. It's impossible to track that. There's just lots of little things going on here. This is segmented and broken, lots of little things. It's impossible to track that. Really, the goal needs to be to simplify to get back to portfolio that looks more like that, portfolio that looks more like that, and then to get here into these more segmented portfolios. So that was definitely, when we look at a lot of Burt Reynolds' unfortunate financial decision making, it created a portfolio that looks like this, and that is not our goal. So what is our key takeaway? For Burt Reynolds, the plan was literally not having a plan. And again, wonderful man, wonderful actor, and when you read a lot of the articles about him that he's quoted in, he lived for the moment. And he didn't regret that. Perhaps he did, when he was not behind a camera, but he did not regret that in writing, and his plan, as he loved to say, was not having a plan. So every decision was made without a guide and without considering any long-term value or impact, and as a result, all of the massive amounts of wealth that he did earn in his career as one of the most successful and famous and popular, I think it said, I want to say he had 50 plus movies that he filmed, was for naught when all was said and done. And it's tragic to see that, but that is the case when you actually don't have a plan. And this was a fantastic quote that he had, I thought. It's a little long, but it says, there isn't anything, no matter how good it is or how good it tastes or how much fun it is, where too much is good for you. It can destroy you, and you have to learn. It's a hard lesson, but you have to learn to back off and do as good as you can in your chosen profession, and don't screw it up. And the best way to screw it up is having too much of a good thing. So when we look back at where we feel like, the best advice he has to give us is really having a plan and not necessarily making emotional decisions, but looking at long-term value, being good at what you do, maximizing that benefit, perhaps having, again, multiple streams of income, as we saw with LeBron James, but having a plan and using that as your guide so that you can maximize that wonderful profession and that wonderful income that you're so gifted to generate. So what's our final takeaway from both LeBron and from Burt today? Number one is be circumspect. Take a step back. Force yourself to take a step back. Have a friend that makes you take a step back. Put an app on your phone that makes you take a step back. Whatever it is that's going to cause you to say, wait a second, before I go ahead and spend $2,000 on those 4 pairs of shoes because I know that they're going to go great with the outfit that I just got, or before I decide to take X, Y, and Z trip, or before I decide to not show up for my job one morning, be circumspect. Take a step back and decide whether or not that action is going to be in line with your long-term plan. Give yourself a chance to actually craft a plan. If you keep making emotional decisions and just diving in and don't take a step back, you're never going to have a chance to make a plan. You're not going to give yourself that chance. So give yourself the chance, respect yourself enough to take that step back and create a plan for yourself and for your family, and have that plan defined by values. And if your value truly is in pomp and circumstance, fine. Make sure that that's the plan that you have in place, that that's what you're trying to support so that you can actually reach that goal. There's nothing, everybody has different goals. The way that you view money is personal. It's completely up to you. So whatever that goal is, whatever those goals are, have a plan that supports it and shows you how you're actually going to get there so that you can create a roadmap for yourself. So again, make decisions using that plan as a guide, and be prepared to pivot. Life is going to throw you curveballs. Obviously for LeBron James, it's thrown him a lot of very positive curveballs. He's a young man. Who knows what's going to come next? And I'm sure if you were to ask him about some of the pivots that he didn't plan on making, he would have a laundry list of those as well, as does everyone, star-studded or not. Burt Reynolds, I'm sure, would say the same thing. So be prepared to pivot, because life will come at you, and having a plan gives you the best way to pivot. By having a plan that's value-oriented, you can then take it and swivel whenever you need to. A plan gives you flexibility if it's done correctly. It gives you some vision. It helps you to be more circumspect, and again, it's values-based. And then lastly, and this is getting back really to LeBron, pass this knowledge on. Good, bad, or ugly, we've looked at, obviously we've looked at sort of a Jekyll and Hyde when it comes to money management today. Pass those lessons on. Whether people listen to your advice or not, somebody is actually going to be out there listening, whether it's the person that you're telling those lessons, whether it's even just they're watching your life lessons, are going to be passed on. Pass that education on, first within your family, within the community, educating others, whether it's in personal finance or just in goal setting. Any type of goal setting is fantastic. I see that in First Tee, actually. They don't necessarily talk about finances, they talk about goal setting that can be applied to every aspect of your life. It's absolutely fantastic. So a wonderful way to give back through education of others. And then lastly, in charitable pursuits, and that's one thing that LeBron does in spades. Right now he pays for education. He also pays for bicycles and things that he really values, that he has seen expand his life and his horizons, so he chooses to pass that on. So keep in mind, these are some fantastic last few photos here. Keep in mind that we all make an impact. Star-studded or not, we all make an impact, and we all have valuable lessons to pass along. So make sure that you pass yours along as well. This has been Money Matters for this week. Please check us out on Facebook, Instagram. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a wonderful one.